different chapters bring different challenges for us all, and they're packaged up in different ways for everybody.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I had a really severe reaction to Botox, and the reaction was pretty aggressive, and it left me with a lot of ongoing symptoms. When I came across Vedic meditation, it said like thoughts and meditation coexist, that you don't need to try to empty your mind, that you don't need to try to get rid of thoughts. I learned to meditate because I'd had years and years and years of anxiety. Throughout this whole process, I've still been happy, and I've still had a lot of fulfillment, and there's still been a lot of peace there. And so it really got me thinking, why is that, And I discovered that
Today's guest is a true leader in the space of modern mindfulness and inner transformation. After beginning her career in acting, then moving into the fast-paced world of fashion, including launching her own brand, she eventually discovered Vedic meditation, a practice that not only helped her manage anxiety, but completely changed the course of her life. She went on to build her meditation school, where she now teaches others to reconnect with themselves through meditation and expansive living. If there was ever the perfect person to talk about healing, alignment, and building a life based on authenticity, look no further. Elise Catchlove, welcome to Not So Status Quo.
Thank you for having me. It's beautiful to be here.
It is so lovely to see you. This is the first time that we've met in person. We've started communicating a fair bit on Instagram, and we have a mutual friend, and she was like, you guys would really, really get along. And I think that she was on the money.
I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've just come back from a trip, which is very exciting, and it looked so beautiful.
Yeah. It was beautiful. Yeah, we were in Arrowtown in New Zealand, which is like kind of my happy place, to be honest. It's like my home away from home. My parents have a home there, and so we try and get there every year, and it's just beautiful. We try and go in autumn when the leaves are falling, and it's like to be honest, it's just so magical at that time of year.
It looked magical, and your photos were convincing me that I need to add Arrowtown to my next
Everyone
trip.
needs to put Arrowtown on their bucket list, I think.
I think I wrote to you, I responded to one of your stories and was like, my nervous system instantly calmed just like seeing these beautiful photos.
Mine does too. Like literally when you get off the plane, there's something about that mountain air. People talk about it. There's something, it's like very soothing, and it's so fresh. The air is really crisp over there. And then like as we start driving towards our house, you start to see, particularly if you go in autumn, obviously, you start to see like burnished orange and golden yellow, and just like the most magnificent scenery. And literally everywhere you look is beautiful. You go to a kid's park and it's beautiful. You go to a skate park and it's like you're surrounded by mountains. It is really a very special part of the world, I think.
Wow. So you must be feeling quite grounded, relaxed, centered.
I am.
But I feel like that's your personality anyway. We'll get into that as well. What you your
not always, but
the magic
most
that
of the
you bring
time.
to the world.
Most of the time. Yeah.
So if you could give your current life chapter a title, what would it be?
Oh wow. Okay. I would say discovery.
Beautiful.
I would say discovery. When I first kind of pivoted into meditation and kind of personal development, and I started doing my teacher training in Sydney, I actually fell pregnant with my first child in the midst of my training. So, I was flying back and forth from Sydney, like heavily pregnant.
Wow.
And then I gave birth right at the end of my training, and I actually pushed my final exam until kind of the following year. And so I did my final exam with like a 4.5-month-old baby. And then I graduated, and I started teaching pretty soon after that. But I was teaching in and around Harley's schedule. You know what I mean? And so I would kind of like schedule a course when I had the space and the time. And so I really kind of dedicated a lot of my time to the kids. I've got 2 now. So a couple of years later, I gave birth to Poppy. They're both now 7 and 5.
Wow.
And so I wanted to teach throughout the whole time, that whole kind of period of time. And I wanted to work. I wanted that creative stimulation, and I wanted to kind of contribute to the world in a way and
Mm.
contribute to my family. But I also wanted to be really present with my children. And, and I was privileged enough to be able to make that choice. And so I did spend a lot of my time with the kids. But, last year, Poppy started kindy, Harley was in school. So I started putting my foot on the pedal a bit more. I started working a bit more. And then this year, I have both children in school. So I have a lot more space now. And I think this chapter has been a real chapter of discovering what I want the next however many years to look like, and what I really want to be putting out into the world. Like what kind of work I want to be doing and how I want to be contributing. So there's been a lot of, I think a lot of self-discovery that's come with this chapter. And then also, fully transparently, a couple of years ago, I had a quite a health scare, a bit of a health crisis, I would say. I had a really severe reaction to Botox, which I had injected under my arms for sweating. I'd never had Botox before. And the reaction was pretty aggressive, and it left me with a lot of ongoing symptoms.
Wow.
And then more recently, a diagnosis of MCAS, which is called mast cell activation syndrome, which explained the reason why I had such a severe reaction, but it also explained a lot of things, from my childhood, and why I'd had so many sort of health issues since a young child. And so with that experience, which was really, really challenging, I mean, really, really challenging and quite scary, to be honest. I had some really scary symptoms that sent me for a brain scan and to a cardiologist.
Wow.
And but with that diagnosis has come a lot of discovery in many ways, and discovering what I now need and how boundaried I need to be and how I need to look after myself and what my body really needs.
Yeah.
And so even though, I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy, there has been a lot of clarity and a lot of discovery that's come from that. So it's been I would say this has probably been the biggest chapter of my life.
Yeah.
The most challenging, but so much personal growth has come from it.
It sounds like it.
And a whole new body of work too has come out of it, which I'm sure we can get into later. But discovery certainly has been this chapter for me, I think.
That's really beautiful. And what an interesting time in your life, where I'm sure that daily you were faced with the decision around how am I going to respond to this today?
Yeah.
How am I going to feel about this today? What does the future look like? Do I have a future that is like the one that I've known?
Yeah.
What is my identity with this diagnosis? So, wow, it sounds like there is a lot that you've been through.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. But I think, I don't think anyone coasts through life.
Agreed.
I think different chapters bring different challenges for us all, and they're packaged up in different ways for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people experience great loss in their life. Other people experience health challenges like myself. Other people experience divorce. There's a challenge for everyone.
Agreed.
And within each challenge, there is always growth and wisdom and discovery to be found. And, I always say to my students, where there is darkness, there is always light.
I completely agree.
And you just have to find the light.
Yeah.
You have to search for the light, because sometimes it can feel really dark.
Yeah.
But there's always a glimmer, and I think all of my training and all of my, a decade of meditating and the self-awareness that comes with that stood me in really good stead to be able to navigate it. And, I'm still not symptom free, but I've learned a tremendous amount. I was only just saying to my best friend just a couple of days ago, I was like, I feel like every week I'm getting a little bit closer and a little bit closer to like what works for my body and what is the key to unlock, whatever it may be. It's a slow and steady wins the race, but I believe that everything comes into your life at the exact time that you need it. And so if this journey is a long one, then that's what it needs to be.
My partner and I always say, with every delay is goodness.
Yeah.
Good things will come. So
Yeah. And I think the universe rewards patience too.
I agree. That's something that I've definitely had to learn in this lifetime,
Me
is
too.
patience, and not holding on to, I know what I want. I can see it so clearly. I just want it now. But sometimes there's lessons that we have to learn. I often say to my clients, when we think that the journey is A to B, but it is A to Z, because they're a
Yeah.
key, and you might think that they're redirections or the steps backwards, but they're the necessary steps that we have to go to in order to get to the next step.
Mhm.
And we can't build a staircase straight up.
Mm-mm.
We can build the first step, and the next steps will reveal themselves to you. And it might not be in the way that we hold on so tightly and we feel like it must be, but everything is always working out for our highest good.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to see that when you're in the
Oh,
moment.
100%.
It's really hard to see that.
Yeah.
We're a very, we want things immediately,
Yes.
And I think patience is a skill that really needs to be developed in all of us. And of course, surrender and letting go, which is one of the hardest skills to master, but brings the greatest rewards.
Yes.
And so when I'm, if I'm in the midst of something that feels really big and really challenging and really overwhelming, I constantly return to this too shall pass. And can I surrender a little bit more in this moment to bring me closer to peace?
Your nervous system,
Yeah.
to support you, you have to regulate that nervous system. And the more that you can surrender and have that faith that everything will work out the way that it's meant to, even if you don't know what that looks like, the impact that has on your, not just physical body, but on your mind and your spirit is just transformative.
Absolutely. And I think, suffering comes when we grip too tightly to things and when we want to try and control the outcome of things. And, I'm not into spiritual bypassing, and I'm very much a proponent of feel what's coming up for you, fully feel it, but also let it go.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to sit in that feeling for too long, because that's when it leads to suffering.
Agreed.
So when sadness comes up for me, I just cry.
Yeah.
That's it.
But it's energy.
It's just a release.
You need to release that energy, because the energy's stuck. That's when we find there's disease in the body, because we're not actually processing that and getting that energy out. So I think it's a very balanced way to look at processing emotion.
Yeah, I always say to my clients, emotions are just energy in motion.
Exactly.
They're just energy that's moving through your body. And the problem is, if we don't express it safely, then it gets trapped in the body, and then it starts to manifest in physical symptoms and all kinds of things. And so we always want to be processing and releasing those emotions, so that we're not storing them.
Yeah.
But then also, as I said, not sitting in that for too long, because if we sit in sadness for too long, that sadness can turn into depression very easily.
Yes, it's a slippery slope for sure.
Yeah. And so it's striking that really nice balance, I think, in life, and balance is really difficult for us all, for me as well, and I'm learning so much along the way, and we're all learning so much on the way. And I think that's where meditation is incredibly helpful, because it gives you a greater level of self-awareness.
Yeah. We have just jumped straight into it. We need to come up with some air, because we vibe. We dove
right in.
I love that. So you mentioned before childhood, and you mentioned about some potential ill health in childhood.
Yeah.
When we are looking forward and looking back at our journey thus far, it is really important that we look back and see, where did we come from? Who was that little person? Who was little Elise? What did she love? What was she really passionate about? Like, what lit her up?
Oh my goodness, that's the best question. Okay, so little Elise. Okay, well, let me just say something about little Elise.
Yes.
Little Elise was a highly sensitive little flower.
Beautiful.
She had grit, but she was like just sensitive to the world. You know what I mean? And so when looking back now, it's so interesting looking back at your life as you begin to age, and I think, wow, like as a child, if I was around somebody who was stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, I would literally suck that in like a sponge.
Interesting.
So I actually had a lot of anxiety as a child. I didn't know what that was
Yeah.
when I was a child.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just felt like I was nervous all the time
Yeah.
and I worried a lot. But now I know that that was anxiety,
Yeah.
and that is because I'm a highly sensitive individual, and that's why I was diagnosed with MCAS. People are generally very highly sensitive empaths. So they feel very deeply and they're sensitive to their environment. It now makes me a great teacher because I am very tapped into people's energy, and I can read the room and I can sit with a client and I can feel where they're at and so forth. And so it is my superpower in a lot of ways, but it also has been very challenging to navigate, particularly as a young child. As a teenager, in high school, I had a burning desire to be an actor. And yeah, I know a lot of people don't know that about me, but that was actually my first career.
Was it?
Yeah, I know. Wild. Wildly different to what I do
But
now.
this is exactly why this podcast and the topics that we talk about is so important, because everyone needs to understand that there is not one linear path.
No.
You can reinvent yourself as many times as you like. And there is so many different seasons and chapters in our life, and you are allowed to change your mind. So yeah, don't let me hold you up. Let's go. So
yes.
acting.
Okay. So I actually had that from a child, to be honest.
Okay.
I remember being the lead in my grade 2 play, and I remember I can actually even see that little girl on stage, and I was holding shells, and I remember coming right to the front of the stage, and this huge audience, and I was this little girl, but I remember that feeling of embodying another character. And it was really magical for me. And it was, to be honest, it was also like my safe space because, I was so sensitive to a lot of things in my life that felt like something that was like sacred for me, and I could lose myself in a character.
I was going to say that. I feel like if you can feel so deeply, I'm very naive in the world of acting, but I presume that it means that you can take on the emotion of the character and really embody it and really feel it and then convey that to an audience. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would. Absolutely, I would. And I think that's probably what drew me to it. And, and then in high school, to just kind of layer into the mix, I had very severe cystic acne. And it totally damaged my self-esteem. I mean, it was soul destroying. And it's so interesting because when I think back, there weren't many people in my grade that had really bad acne. There was just like a handful of us. So I felt very lonely during that time, and I felt very insecure and self-conscious. And really looking back, I mean, I was depressed for sure for a couple of years. And so I think acting again was like that escapism, which sounds unhealthy, but it didn't feel unhealthy at the time. It just felt like I could get on stage or I could get behind a camera and, even though I didn't like the way I looked, I could kind of become somebody else and embody their energy and the way they walked and the way they moved and the way they talked. And that felt really comforting, I think, in a lot of ways. And also, I have always been a very creative person. And so that was, a very creative outlet for me. And even though there was like a lot of trauma that came from my skin kind of journey in high school, I still really enjoyed my schooling years, and I had lots of friends and I was well liked. And there was also, I was carrying a sadness for sure. I was carrying a sadness. Then I left school, and thankfully my skin had cleared up at that point. And I dove right into acting right out of school. So I went and I studied at the University of Southern Queensland. So I auditioned for a bunch of acting schools, and that's where I got in. I don't know what it's like now. It was considered quite a good school back in the day. So I got 6 months into the training,
Yeah.
and I freaked out that I was never going to get any work. And, my parents were always so supportive of me pursuing acting. They were really amazing about it. But they always said, but might be an idea to have a plan B. And so I deferred. I came back to Brisbane and I studied fashion. And that's where the fashion began.
Interesting. Okay.
So I studied fashion design and I majored in marketing. And I finished that, and then I got itchy feet again.
Oh no. I know that feeling really well.
Yes.
And it grips hold of you.
Grips hold of
you
you.
can try and suppress it, but it remains.
Once you
It
have
gets
that
loud.
acting bug, it's really hard to get rid
imagine.
of. So I went back to acting and I studied in Brisbane at a private school. I moved to Sydney for a year and did film and television, like intensive studies down there. I had an agent, la la la. And while all of this was happening, I had a day job. Every actor has a day job.
Yeah.
And so I worked in fashion retail. Some of my fondest memories, honestly, are from those days. I met some of my closest friends through my fashion retail days. I'm still in touch with a lot of the clients that I had from those days. It was actually a really beautiful time in my life, I will say. And I was lucky enough to work for some great businesses. I started out working at Lisa Ho, which was an incredible company to work for.
Yeah, I remember having a Lisa Ho dress.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
quality. She was like the Australian designer of that kind of era. And I worked for her in Brisbane and I worked in her Sydney stores and so forth. And all the while I was auditioning. I did a final gig actually for the Spearig brothers. They're two Aussie directors. And I did some pre-production work for a film that they were filming with Ewan McGregor. And I was brought in to kind of test whether they could cast a female and transform her into a man with prosthetics. So I worked with an incredible makeup crew that did the most amazing, amazing prosthetics and turned me into a dead ringer of a guy. Literally.
What a transformation.
Yeah, it was wild. And we shot that and it was really fun. And then they called me into audition for the actual role.
Yeah.
And I missed out. And it was really at that point that I think I just felt really quite burnt out from the industry. You face a lot of rejection as an actor. And so I was like, I think it's time I step away. And I thought I was just going to take a break, but I never went back. And I don't regret that, but I never went back. That was my last job. And so I continued working in fashion. And then again, I got itchy feet and I was like, I need to do something more. And that's when I started my clothing brand.
We've discussed that there's a lot of crossovers here.
Yeah.
And starting a clothing brand takes
Oh my God.
a lot of time, passion,
energy,
resources,
money.
Financial.
A lot.
Dealing with suppliers, doing your tech packs, communicating your designs, waiting for your samples. Like it's not a quick process.
It's not.
How did you find being in the world of fashion from the designer's perspective and not being in the
on the shop floor? Yeah. Totally different. Totally different. I loved the creative side of it. That was amazing. I had a team in Vietnam that I worked with. They made all the clothes. And so I would fly over and I would sit with the tailors and I had a translator because they didn't speak any English. And that was really fun and interesting. And I learnt so much and I really loved that side of it. That forms a minuscule amount of what you end up doing as a designer or what you end up doing as the owner of the business.
Yes.
And so I quickly realized that majority of my time was actually spent behind a computer screen and I was spending very little time kind of out in the world. And my wheelhouse where I feel really comfortable and lit up is actually with people and the kind of sharing of knowledge. And I think that's part of the reason why I ended up pivoting. But I started to feel really unfulfilled. That's really the only word I can use. It just felt unfulfilling. And even though I adore fashion and I still adore fashion and I love it as a form of self-expression and I worked in fashion, I had worked in fashion for long enough to know that, when you dress a woman in something that makes them feel really good in their body, it can completely change their energy.
Yes.
And so I know the power of clothes, and I believe in the power of clothes, and I still do believe in that. You know, even though I work in personal development and meditation,
Yeah.
I still do believe in the power of dressing to feel really good in your skin and really good in your body. But in terms of running it as a business, it was so unfulfilling.
And that feeling of unfulfillment, did that prompt the
yeah,
next itchy feet phase?
yeah, it did. But I didn't know what to do with it at the
Okay.
time. To be honest, I was terrified of closing the brand down. I was so worried about, what will people think of me?
Mhm.
You know, failed fashion brand. She didn't try hard enough. I was so worried about what everybody else thought
Yes.
instead of following
As
what
is
felt
often is the
really
case.
totally. And
Yeah.
when you're young and you're working all of this out, like
Yeah.
it's such a normal feeling. It's such a normal experience. And I think we need to normalize it more, to be
Yes.
honest.
Yeah.
That uncomfortable space that you sit in where you're so scared of judgment and you're so scared to trust your own instincts,
Yeah.
that what's going to be the fallout from that.
Yes.
And that, but it wasn't that actually made me pivot. It was learning to meditate. And I didn't learn to meditate because I was unfulfilled in fashion. I learned to meditate because I'd had years and years and years of anxiety,
Mm.
and very high functioning anxiety. But my really unhealthy coping mechanism when it came to anxiety was avoidance. So anything that would trigger fear would fire off my anxiety. And I didn't like the way the anxiety made me feel, so I would avoid.
Mm.
So I played really, really small for a long time. I can't begin to tell you how many auditions I turned down. And it was all because of fear. You know, I would get a call from my agent the day before an audition and saying, okay, Elise, I've got this audition for you. It's on the Gold Coast. I'm sending you a 10-page script. You need to be there tomorrow, like off book, as in all lines learnt. And it's the most intimidating, scary,
I can imagine.
being in front of a director or a casting director and a camera,
Knowing you're being compared to others as well.
100%, and you're young and
Yeah.
you're at Warner Brothers Studios on the go. It's so intimidating.
Yep.
So there was so many times where I would like almost fool myself, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get the day off work tomorrow. I can't call in sick this last minute. But it was me self-soothing,
Mm-hmm.
because as soon as I would turn it down, the anxiety would dissipate.
Right.
I would soothe myself,
Yep.
and I felt safe again. And that became a pattern. And anything that you do repeatedly forms a neural pathway in your brain.
Yes.
A pattern gets developed. And so I had this
Yep.
pattern over and over. I know what to do. I'll just turn it down. That'll make me feel good. I'll feel safe after I do that. And so, you know, I did that for a long time. And I got to a point where honestly, I just felt jack of the anxiety. And that's when I learned to meditate. And that's when my whole life shifted.
Wow.
Like, it sounds so cliche, and it is, but it truly shifted everything for me. And I was that person that honestly thought there is no way I'm ever going to be able to meditate. Like I've got a monkey mind.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a monkey mind.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a busy, crazy mind.
Mm.
Everyone thinks that.
Mm.
I can't begin to tell you how many times I've heard that from people.
Yeah.
My mind is crazy. I can't shut my mind off. So I was kind of skeptical of everything. And I'd always been into wellness from very young. It was actually a real passion of mine, was wellness. But I always reached for the lowest hanging fruit, which tends to be nutrition, movement, all of those kinds of things. And I put meditation into the too hard basket.
Mm.
But for anxiety, meditation is the creme de la creme.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do find that some people are quite skeptical when it comes to meditation and mindfulness. And I do believe that comes from a place of not really truly understanding the modality as well.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know what in particular, because Vedic meditation is what you're very much called to.
Yeah.
What is it about that specific type of meditation that you are so drawn to?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, when I was like doing my research and I thought, okay, I'm going to try this meditation thing. I'm going to give it a go. what have I got to lose?
Mm.
When I came across Vedic meditation, it said like thoughts and meditation coexist, that you don't need to try to empty your mind, that you don't need to try to get rid of thoughts. And I was like, well, I think that might be the meditation practice for me. It's one of the most freeing parts of Vedic meditation, that the aim is not to empty the mind. That the mantra, it's a mantra-based meditation practice, and the mantra has a very charming resonance to the mind. So it naturally is guiding the mind down into these deeper and subtler states of awareness. And then thoughts pop in, and that's so fine. And we return to the mantra, and that gently guides the mind away and pulls the mind down into these deeper, subtler states of awareness. And then thoughts pop in again, and that's okay. And we smile inside. And so that is ultimately what drew me to the practice. Also, the flexibility of the practice, that it could be done anywhere at any time. And I didn't need technology, and I didn't need to be tapped into anything and have earphones in, that I could literally do it anywhere. That was also a draw card for me. And I think that's a draw card for a lot of people, because for most of us, we're all extremely busy. So anything that we can, you don't want meditation to make your life harder. You want it to make your life easier.
Yeah.
And so if you have a practice that you can do while sitting in the hairdresser, getting your hair color processed, or while you're sitting on a train going to work, or while you're sitting on an airplane flying to Sydney for a meeting, if you can do your meditation there, sitting in a parked car while you're waiting for your kids to be picked up from school, then to me, that's everything.
So much easier to integrate into your life.
So much easier.
But also, I'm not a meditator, but
That's okay.
Because I've never really tried it, to be honest. However, I completely understand the transformative and healing power of meditation. Being mindful and practicing mindfulness is something that I've had to learn to incorporate into my days, because just bringing your awareness into your body and calming the mind, even for a few minutes a day, when we are so used to go, even just a couple of minutes has made such an impact to my overall well-being. I can't imagine what meditation and Vedic meditation could do.
Yeah, it really gets you in your body. And it helps you to access the purest part of who you are. And that's, I know that sounds really woo-woo, but that is truly the gift of meditation, is that you're moving beyond the idea you have about yourself, your identity, who you think you are, and you're moving down into these deeper and subtler states of awareness, and eventually down into what we call transcendence, or pure being, soul consciousness. They all mean the same thing, but essentially that is the purest part of who you are, where there's no berating and there's no storyline and there's no, bullshit, to be honest. It's just pure, loving awareness. And when you bathe down in that every day, you start to bring that out into your eyes open experience of the world, and you start to dismantle this identity that we have about ourselves. And that is really the most beautiful gift of meditation. I'll never forget, one of my meditation teacher colleagues told this story, that she was teaching. She was doing a group course. She's also a Vedic teacher. And she was doing a group course, and there was a mother and daughter in the group. And the daughter, I think she was about 18. And at the end of the course, the daughter pulled her fake eyelashes off and she put them on the table in front of her. And she said, I guess I won't be needing those anymore.
Wow.
That is the gift of meditation. It's realizing that there is nothing outside of you that will ever truly bring you happiness than the happiness you can experience inside of yourself. That everything you need is really inside of yourself, but there's so much confusion around that. And there's, we've been led to believe that if we buy a new house or a new car or a new handbag or get a new haircut, that will bring us the happiness and fulfillment and peace that we're really searching for. And all of those things are fabulous, and there's nothing wrong with them. I always say, if you desire something fabulous and you have a goal, you go out there and go for it. There is nothing wrong with that. Wherein lies the problem is our attachment to those things. And
Yes.
so if we think that that is going to bring us happiness and fulfillment, if we think it's going to make us cooler, more likable, we're going to experience very quickly that that's not the case. And that's why it's a constant chase.
Yes.
Because then we get that thing and for a moment we feel great, and then very quickly we move back to our baseline.
100%. I just released a solo episode that is talking about material objects. Great.
Yeah.
But why? Like, what is it? What is the feeling that
You're
thing
chasing.
is that's going to bring you? Because when you understand that, there's a lot of other ways that you can make sure that you are experiencing those feelings or those emotions that would bring. It's not to say you can't still go out and get that thing,
Mhm.
but having that deeper understanding of what is it that I'm actually chasing. It's
Absolutely.
actually this feeling of like lightness or peace or stability or
Yeah.
exhilaration or
Freedom.
freedom, whatever that may
Yeah.
be, is so important. You also mentioned identity before,
Mhm.
and our self-concept.
Yep.
We often attach ourselves to identities that we've outgrown, and there's a reluctance for us to shed parts of ourselves because that's how we've always seen ourselves, or that's how the world around us sees ourselves.
Mhm.
Talk to me about, so you went from acting to fashion
Mhm.
to meditation, and arguably that's quite a big shift from,
Huge.
to meditation.
Huge.
Step me through your identity journey in that, and any mindset shifts that you had to do to be able to step into your authentic self and jump in with 2 feet.
Yeah, good question. I think I had to develop a lot of courage, actually. I think I had to develop a lot of courage
Yeah.
to be seen in a different way, to see myself in a different way.
Yes.
It's very different being on stage, in front of hundreds of people performing as somebody else, to being in a room with 10 meditators looking to you for the knowledge. You have nowhere to hide, like you're, and you don't want to hide.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I can't speak for any other teacher, but for me as a teacher, I share very vulnerably with my students. And I will share struggles that I've had. I'm actually quite a private person, believe it or not, which is why it's so interesting that I told you that story right off the bat about the Botox. But I'm trying to get more comfortable with sharing vulnerable stories because I can do it in a teaching environment very easily with my students. I can get very vulnerable with my students. But in terms of like on a podcast or on a larger scale, I can hold things a little bit closer to my chest. And I'm trying to get more comfortable with sharing more vulnerably so that it can help others.
Yes.
Because I know that when I listen to a podcast or I listen to another woman's story, it's the people who share really, really vulnerably, even when it's really scary, I'm sure, for them to do that. Like, I think we underestimate how scary it is for anyone, a woman, a man, anyone, to share their mental health journey, to share their physical health journey, to share tragedies that's happened. It takes a lot of courage
Absolutely.
to share in that way on that scale.
Yeah.
But I always gain so much more insight from the people who do. And so I'm trying to really step into that. And that has been a process, and I'm getting so much closer to that. And so I think, to your question, courage has probably been the biggest thing for me, is really like sitting in a room and going, okay, like, let's do this, guys. Like, let's learn this new tech, because this is not just a technique. This is not just a practice. People need their hand held. They need to feel seen and heard. We're all going through really difficult things in life. And that's the reason why a lot of people turn to meditation in the first place. So holding space for those people and being seen in a different way. But also I'm very cognizant of, I never want any of my students to put me or anybody else on a pedestal.
Very
And I think that's
important.
really easy to do in the spiritual
Yes.
world and the personal development world as a teacher. Like, people can look to you as, you know, the holy grail, or
Yes.
you've got all the answers. I don't think any of us have all the answers. I think we seek out a teacher who has the right answers that we're needing in that moment.
Agreed.
And there's a different teacher for everybody in a different season of their life. But at the end of the day, we're all just humans.
Yeah.
Like, on this wild journey of life. And so I never ever want to be seen to be, you know, I would never want my students to, and they're probably not, but I'm also very cognizant of that. I'm just like everybody else. Every spiritual teacher is just like everybody else. They've just got a few more tools in their toolkit, and therefore they have some wisdom and knowledge to share. And that's it.
And that's what people are searching for. And I
Yeah.
think everyone has wisdom and knowledge to share, and people are coming to you for your superpowers, your specialty.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love what you said around not putting people on a pedestal, because that's also a really quick way to diminish our own brilliance and our own gifts and knowledge and skill set as well when we're idolizing other people. Because bringing it back to what you said at the start, everyone is going through things. Everyone has a journey, and you might see the glossiness of social media, and you know, we all know that that's it's a highlight reel for the most part.
Yeah.
And unless you understand truly what that person's life is and what fights are going on in their household, or illnesses are plaguing themselves or their family members, or the struggles that they're going through, idolizing people, I agree with you, is misplaced, and it's not helpful.
Yeah. And I think, you know, as I said before, everything that we need is already inside of ourselves.
Yes.
But sometimes we need a teacher or a mentor to remind ourselves of that. And they also might have a different skill set too that we can draw upon. But ultimately, you know, whenever I'm learning, I'm always trying to have that in the back of the mind, in the back of my mind, that these are all just reminders. Like, I think life is just a journey of forgetting and remembering and forgetting again, so that we can remember again, and forgetting and remembering and unlearning and relearning. And I think that that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Even though it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you say learning and relearning, I can imagine students that are coming to you, there's probably some blocks that are going on. Potentially they may not be embodying their authentic self as well, and they're looking for a way to be able to unlock or express who they are at their core. What do you find in your teachings in Vedic meditation can particularly help shift any blocks and really help people get deep down to who they truly are, explore who they really are at their core?
Yeah. So I get that question a lot from people. They say to me, Elise, how do I know who my authentic self is? Like, you know, it sounds like a very pie in the sky concept, right? And it is in many regards, because it's kind of so foreign to us, because society is telling us who we should be all the time. You know, since we're really, really young, we're being programmed. Eat this, don't eat that, wear this, don't eat that, look like this, don't look like that, you know, walk like this, don't walk like that. There's so much societal and peer influence and social media influence that's happening from a really, really young age. And so then we become an adult and we're so confused because there's so much messaging. I mean, I don't know how many times I hear people say, I don't even know what to eat anymore, right?
It's this diet. No, it's this one. And this
No, hang on, now it's carnivore. No, it should be vegan. No, now that we have totally lost trust in our intuition. And there's like layers upon layers that we need to shed in order to be able to really tap into our intuition. And I think that is the biggest block. It's truly this kind of identity piece where we're navigating life from this idea of who we are, because we don't really know who we are, because we're so damn confused.
Do you know what's really interesting? When you said that, I had this light bulb kind of connecting of the dots happen for me. And I thought, you know, when I'm not in tune with my intuition, it's when I'm in that masculine energy, that hustle. And I feel like a lot of us in our day to day, you know, I'm sure many of us lay our head on that pillow and we think, how do we get here? This day has just gone so quickly.
Yeah.
And when we are caught up in that, the existing responsibilities and commitments and the busyness of life, it can be difficult to step out of that masculine hustle, hustle, hustle. And when I'm in my feminine flow, as I find with a lot of people, that's when you're very in tune with your intuition,
Yep.
which makes a lot of sense because when you slow down, and meditation is very much feminine energy. So these are the dots that are connecting for me. I'm like, yeah, you're intentionally tapping into that feminine energy. By nature, you are going to feel so much more in tune with your body, probably a lot more magnetic.
Yep.
And so much more intuitive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always say that, anything that slows you down, that calms your nervous system, walking in nature and we were just in New Zealand as we were discussing, and I was like, we went horse riding as a family, and we did, walks along the creek, and we did some fast-paced stuff too. Harley and I did zip lining and all the rest.
Yeah, all the fun things.
Yeah, all the fun things. But anything that really slows you down, any form of introspection, journaling, writing can be very cathartic to get your thoughts out of your head and onto paper, to start to clear the junk on the surface level of the mind. Vedic meditation gets you there quicker because that's exactly what it's designed to do. But there are many ways to skin a cat. And I always say that the right meditation practice is the one that you stick with. So it's not meditating once a day that will change your life. It's meditating consistently every day, that constant coming home to yourself.
Beautiful.
And so when we meditate and we're diving down into the purest part of who we are, intuition lies on the cusp of that. And so when we start to make contact with that, our intuition naturally starts to sharpen. And it will sharpen in that meditative state first, and then we start to bring it out into our eyes open experience of the world. And so in the Veda, we talk about a concept which is charm, following charm, and that fine level of feeling. So that fine level of feeling is communicating with us all the time. But when there is a lot of noise and a lot of junk on the surface level of the mind, it's very difficult to hear that fine level of feeling that's saying, say yes to that opportunity. No, don't do that. No, maybe don't go there. Yes, go there. Walk through that door. And so as we meditate more and more, we start to sharpen that.
It's like those gentle whispers become a little bit louder and more bold, perhaps.
Yeah, just more, we're in tune with them more. That is the greatest gateway to really discovering your authentic self. We've got to quieten the noise.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you the amount of times I've taught somebody to meditate and then they will come to me and say, oh my God, all these things are happening that I didn't expect. And they're not necessarily glossy. This is a misconception that you begin to meditate and all of a sudden all these glossy things and opportunities start landing in your lap. Yes, that will happen. Of course it will. But actually quite often there is a letting go that happens.
You can't bring in you if you're holding on to the old. You have to make space and clear that out.
Yep.
Wow.
And so people will say, I remember I taught this student and she came back, and because I always offer for my students to come back and resit whenever they want to refresh on the knowledge. And she came back a few years later and she was telling the group, she said, I had a friendship group at the time that was really toxic, but I just couldn't step away, And she said, and I learned to meditate. And all of a sudden I was like, I just cannot continue with these toxic relationships. And she said, and I walked away. And she said, and it was really painful.
I can imagine.
Because letting go is always packaged up with grief, anger, frustration, tension. Like there's so many emotions that come with letting go of something in order to make make room for something else to come in. But it can be quite painful at the time. But then she said now her life is so much richer because of that decision. And so there is always beauty on the other side. You know, at the other end of the rainbow, there is the gold is waiting, but it can be quite painful to get to that point. And for a lot of people, they run from that.
Yeah, it change. And
Yeah.
and we know
And I understand why.
the brain, and we like to familiar and, you know,
Of
and all
course,
of
it
that.
keeps us safe.
100%. Tell me about your expansive living and how this all ties in together. Talk me through what it is and the concept and how that marries really nicely.
Okay. So obviously I was teaching Vedic meditation for, you know, the last 8 years, I would say. And then this kind of health crisis happened. And all of a sudden I was experiencing a tremendous amount of discomfort in my body. I had some really dark days, Lauren, like really hard days where I was like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? Am I having a heart attack? Like, am I having a stroke?
Wow.
But throughout this whole process, I've still been happy and I've still had a lot of fulfillment and there's still been a lot of peace there. And so it really got me thinking, why is that, you know? And it doesn't mean that it's been easy. I don't want to paint that picture at all. It has not been easy. But it certainly got me thinking, why is it that I can still feel happy, not all day, every day, but how is it that I'm able to traverse this and have a level of happiness and fulfillment? And I discovered that there were a lot of things that I have applied to my life that have helped me to do that. And so that's where this kind of whole new body of work came from. It actually came from like a really difficult time. And so I developed this new philosophy and it's called expansive living, and it's kind of my third baby right now. I feel really passionate about it. And there are 10 pillars to the framework. I call them the modern day 10 commandments, to help you live a really deeply nourishing, fulfilling, you know, beautiful and peaceful life. And one of the pillars is baseline happiness. Not like total happiness all the time, complete inner peace all the time, but a baseline level of happiness. And I think that is what I've really cultivated in this last 10 years, is a really solid baseline level of happiness. And I want to teach others that is the secret sauce right there. And there's 9 other pillars. So there's so many other things that come into, that sort of package up a really fulfilling life. There's so many things that we need to be thinking about. But baseline happiness would be the absolute number one, so that when shit does hit the fan, as it does in life, and if we do experience something that's really challenging, we can feel it, we can process it, we can move through it, and then we can return to our baseline happiness.
You've got a foundation.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And I think that's what we're really missing.
I agree.
You know, and I think I discovered that because, you know, high school was challenging in a lot of ways because of my skin, and then being a highly sensitive person had its challenges and so forth. But I would say that for most of my life, I have been able to still be happy, even though, you know, certainly the high school years were pretty challenging. I think they are for a lot of people. But most definitely since learning to meditate, I've really been able to cultivate that baseline happiness, so that, you know, I can be in the thick of it and I can feel it and it sucks and it's horrible. And then I can like come out the other side and I can move back to my baseline.
Yeah.
I'm not plummeting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's this whole new body of work that I'm teaching. And as I said, I'm really passionate about it. I'm hopeful that it will be really valuable to a lot of people. And so I'm teaching it for the very first time in a few weeks. I'm running, I think this is probably going to air afterwards, but I'm running a expansive living immersion for women this time. And I'll be teaching this philosophy for the first time. And then there's a whole range of other beautiful things packaged up in the immersion.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
Because
you.
developing a model and then teaching that, refining it, and then teaching that,
Yeah.
embodying it as well. Well done. I
Thank you.
think even just seeing what the night looks like, and you've teamed up with someone who looks like they're going to put on the most magical spread.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah, she's the most
listening needs to
incredible.
run to Elise's Instagram and take a look at the photos and the videos and anything that's been put up about it, and sign up for the next one, because hopefully there'll be more.
Yes, yeah, there will be more.
Okay.
There will be more, and I'll be teaching it in a variety of ways. So I'll be
Okay.
doing it in these immersive experiences for people who want to
Yep.
also do sound baths and walking meditations and have a lush dinner and all of those
walking
kinds of things. Yes, I'm
meditation.
doing a really cool walking meditation in nature, which is really exciting. Yeah,
I might have to join you for that.
I think you will. I think you should. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be really beautiful.
Yeah.
But then I'm also going to teach it more so in an intensive.
Okay.
So that'll probably be a 3 or 4 hour intensive for
Yep.
people who want to really dive deep. There's a lot of journaling that works alongside the practice, and really extrapolating each pillar. And so I'll be teaching it in that format. And then eventually I do have plans to move it online for people who can't be in person.
More impact.
Yeah. There is nothing more beautiful for me than in person. I love in person.
It is different, like that connection.
It totally is
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
But I also know that, I've also sat a lot of online courses
Yep.
and had great value from
Yep.
them. And so, I will be moving it online eventually,
Yeah.
for people who can't travel or be there in person. So there's a lot on the horizon, but I'm like a slow and steady wins the race
Mhm.
kind of a gal.
Mhm.
So one thing at a time, let's do it well, and then let's see what else comes from that, or what else is in store for me. Who knows? I know now, like one thing I know for sure is that life is unpredictable.
Yes.
And there are 400 twists and turns along the way. And I honestly dead set thought I was going to be an actor. I mean, there was no changing my mind. I was like, I'm doing it. You watch me.
Yeah.
And yet here I am, and I'm now teaching meditation. So
Yeah.
I know that I'm sure there's going to be many more twists and turns to come. But I feel really excited about that.
And I wonder if you feel excited because you do have a solid foundation. You know who you are. You have modalities and the skills and the knowledge now to hold yourself and really support yourself through life seasons.
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, I think everyone needs a
I agree.
toolbox.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs a toolbox. I really, really do. And I think that we need to be prioritizing that more. And it doesn't have to be this crazy, 2-hour morning routine. If I am feeling heightened or triggered, I just literally return to my breath and I do box breathing. And it's the simplest technique in the world.
I teach that to my clients too.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's
I did it last night before I slept.
Yeah, same. I do it quite often before I go to sleep. If I'm struggling to fall asleep, I box breathe, I fall straight to sleep.
Yep.
It just calms the nervous system. So having these little tools in your toolbox that you can reach to at any point in your day, and different tools for different things.
Yeah.
Because we do need to employ different strategies depending on what it is that we're working through. And so I think having a variety of tools, and that's why a variety of teachers is really great.
Yeah.
Because we learn something different from each teacher, and everyone's got a different set of skills and knowledge to impart, and we can cherry pick. And we can cherry pick what works for us. Because what works for me might not necessarily work for you in totality, but you might be able to pull bits and pieces and go, oh my God, that pillar right there, that's the juice for me right now. That's what I'm really needing. So I'm going to dive really deep into that, and then let's see what comes of that. And then maybe I'll start to explore, another couple of the other pillars, and I'll start to dive more deeply into those, and let's see where that takes us. And so that's the great thing about being a human being, is that you have choices and you have autonomy.
Yeah.
And particularly in the world we now live in, now we get to choose.
Yeah.
That wasn't always the case, particularly for women.
Yeah.
And so take advantage of that, and go out there and do what feels really good for you.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
We have shared values and a shared vision for how we would love to see more women empowered, giving themselves permission to be their authentic self and live a life to their highest potential.
Yeah.
I've loved this chat.
It was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
You're so
Please
welcome.
tell everyone, where can we find you online?
Okay, so my Instagram handle is just at Elise Catchlove,
Yep.
and my website is elisecatchlove.com. Pretty simple. You can find everything there. I love hearing from people, so send me a DM.
Yeah.
If you have a question, I'm an open book, so I respond to all of my DMs. So feel free to reach out and ask me anything. And I've started doing a new Ask Me Anything series, which people have been really enjoying, around challenges. What is challenging you right now?
Yeah.
And I'll give some like reflections and
I like that.
yeah.
I really enjoy your Instagram stories.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're all very calming. You give off a very calm, like your vibe is beautiful to be around, and
Thank you.
your energy is exactly how I thought it would be. It really translates through. So
That's nice to hear. Thank you.
thank you so much, and we will catch up soon.
Absolutely. We need to have a matcha.
Absolutely. Or a mint no-dough
or a mint
smoothie.
no-dough smoothie. Thanks, Lauren.